Yeah, so the next lightning talk is by Mitchell, and it's going to be about sustainability and fairness of DPI, lesson learned from the ground.
Yeah, thank you. So, till my slides come up. So, I'll be talking about DPIs and the sustainability and fairness of digital public infrastructure. So, I think everyone in this room and even generally we agree that technology can help us accelerate the speed of achieving the sustainable development goals. Slides are not yet up, I think. So, of course, it can help us achieve sustainable development goals, and it can also help us in creating a more inclusive and fair society. But the sustainability of DPI itself is also very important. So, first of all, the DPI itself has to be sustainable. And we think there are three key criterias that go into creating a sustainable DPI, which can help us in creating a more inclusive and fair society. And those are the first one, which deals with everything to do with governance, the right set of laws, the right set of policies, the right set of regulations. Now, law, you may not be tinkering with law, with your laws quite often, but especially if you are creating DPIs which deal with public information, private information of the individuals, then of course it makes sense to look at the legal framework. The second is the architecture and the design. The architecture and design follows very closely from the policy that you adopt. But at the same time, you have to think about the scale you're building for. There's a population scale system, the role of the ecosystem, and you have to think long term, say 10 years and more. And the last one is economics and the funding, which is the most important, by the way. So how the DPI has to be funded. And now I'll use an example from one of the largest DPIs in the world, which is India's digital ID system, and how it does on sustainability and fairness. So in terms of scale, it's the largest digital ID system anywhere in the world. It has about 1.3 billion people registered in it. For its sustainability, government has committed its funding. But I would just like you to look at the costs that the government is incurring. So it was started off in 2009, and for the last 12 years, government has spent about $1.8 billion in this particular infrastructure to issue 1.3 billion identities to people. So less than $1 was the cost of issuing identity, and rest of it is operational cost and so on. So on an annual basis, government spends about $128 million in maintaining this infrastructure. $35 million is what the authority which runs this ID system generates, and the $93 million, and we can say round off $100 million is a shortfall, which is funded by the government. Now, the interesting thing to see here is this Aadhaar as an infrastructure, it processes about 1.5 billion transactions every month, right? And in addition, it does 250 million eKYC transactions every month. So we're talking about transactions, annual transactions in the range of 21 billion every year. So now if it's running 21 billion transactions, if you look at the per transaction cost, it comes to around 0.6 cents, right? Now this 0.6 cents is not passed on to the institutions or the businesses that are using this ID or to individuals. Government is subsidizing 100 million. So the cost that is passed on to the institutions is less than 0.2 cents. And now look at the benefits. And I'm just, as a bare bones benefits, these are very simple benefits, like $30 billion government has saved just after launching this program. And it's a very simple use case, just by adding the unique ID number. It's not a sophisticated use case I'm talking about. The $44 billion which the service providers saved, because this eKYC cost is now 20 cents. So 0.2 cents is the transaction cost, and 20 cents is the overall eKYC process cost. And this used to be in the range of $5 plus before this. So now now testing it on the principle of fairness, is it helping us create a more inclusive and fair society? The answer is big yes. Because from the private sector standpoint, private sector was not even serving the marginal community. It was not even serving the poor, especially banks, because the cost of opening the bank accounts was at least $5. Now that cost is just 20 cents. But for that, the regulatory systems also move together and to make it happen. And with this, the achievement is 470 million new bank accounts are opened using digital ID. And most of these accounts are of the poor people. Every household in India is now connected to a formal banking system. There are more than, from a private sector standpoint, 100 million new customers were onboarded by a private telecom operator who launched a new service within 3 months. It wouldn't have been possible in years had they been doing manual KYC. Now the instant account is possible for every service which requires a KYC. On the government side, government saved a lot, but they did not keep the savings to themselves. They were redistributed. Redistributed in the form of 90 million poor people getting access to the cooking gas program, because that was the kind of saving they were able to achieve. For a food program, the corruption or the leakage used to be as high as 50%. It was reduced to less than 5%. So all this is the direct savings and direct benefits that the government is getting. Now testing it on the three principles that I highlighted earlier. So law, policy, and regulation. India had a very clear policy from the beginning. The directionally it was clear. So we needed a foundational ID, minimal data, ecosystem approach. Government was not trying to do everything by itself. On regulation side, also things moved pretty swiftly, because the financial service regulator, telecom regulator, everyone was pretty much aligned with the kind of things a digital ID system can enable, and modified the regulations accordingly. On the law side, we did not do maybe as well, because the law came later. It was founded in 2009, law came 5-6 years after the program was launched. And because of which the whole ID program was dragged to the courts. And what it led to curtailing of several private sector use cases. Even some businesses had to go back to the drawing board and replan their business models. Many of the startups went out of businesses and so on. So that was the flip side of it. But anyways, still it's thriving and going on. On the architecture and design side, of course, the policy direction was very clear. Some of the best minds in the world were working on the architecture and design. And the system was itself designed for population scale and to serve a large ecosystem of enterprises and people. On the funding side, funding was never a challenge, though government could have very easily increased the cost and private sector would have happily paid. So even government would not even have to spend $100 million on this, but government still chooses to spend on it. And there's a clear policy direction for this. So just to sum up, these are the three key criteria. If you're planning a DPI, or even if you're in the middle of implementing it or operating, if these three key principles, you can do a quick litmus test for your DPIs, and it will tell you its chances of success. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitchell. This is great lesson learned, actually.